Hello friends, and welcome to the channel, where we delve into the mind of a villain. In this entry, we'll be taking a look at Lucifer Safin, the villain from the James Bond film No Time to Die. Safin is an embodiment of the notion of evil begetting evil. He was the son of a scientist who worked for Spectre, one who was eventually cut off when Mr. White, under Blofeld's orders, gave him and his family a taste of their own medicine. Young Safin survived, but the exposure to the high levels of dioxin scarred him for life, resulting in skin lesions and a patchy appearance. But beyond the physical scarring, the mental scarring from watching the gruesome death of his parents cannot be overstated. As an adult, Safin is soft-spoken and mellow, and what few words he speaks are spoken in a subdued manner that requires much effort. There is a certain level of blankness in his eyes, a hollow expression of sorts, reflecting the past trauma that still plagues him. But beneath the meek personality of his damaged exterior lies a burning desire for the most common of evil motivations: revenge. We first encounter Safin in his break-in of Mr. White's home in Norway. Here, Safin is introduced wearing a Japanese no mask from kabuki theater culture. It would seem that Japanese culture has quite an influence on Safin, as seen by his choice of disguise here and by the Japanese-themed room and attire he has in his base at the end. Given that his chemical plant is located in disputed waters between Japan and Russia, it's likely that he might have spent some time in the country. On the outset, the mask that he wears serves the purpose of camouflaging with the snow and concealing his face. But the mask itself represents a dichotomy within the character, as intended by the film's costume designer. The mask has a fairly neutral expression, but when combined with the hostile intent indicated by his accessory of an automatic rifle, it makes him look like a relentless monster out of a horror movie, and even more so when it gets fragmented. The contrast between the whiteness of his mask and the ruggedness of his skin is symbolic of the differing traits that Safin has. Throughout his few scenes in the movie, he is rageful yet tranquil, agitated yet somewhat serene, soft-spoken but bearing a firm resolve. A pivotal moment occurs in Safin's life when he encounters a young Madeline. Since he was looking to inflict maximum pain on Mr. White, Safin would have every reason to finish off Madeline as well. But somehow, the look in her eyes, the expression of desperation and helplessness, was enough to convince him to set aside his vendetta against Mr. White and save her instead. The look in Madeline's eyes left such an impression that over the years, Safin would develop somewhat of a reverse Stockholm syndrome, a scenario where a captor develops feelings for their victims. Because he saved her from death, Safin believes that Madeline owes him her life and should serve as his surrogate wife. But the fact that he believes he can have any meaningful relationship with her after killing her mother and threatening her daughter shows just how out of touch with reality he is. He also shows no such concern for Matilda and was willing to let her go, perhaps out of wanting to distance himself from another man's child. Beyond the apparent need for revenge, a recurring theme with Safin is his need for acceptance. We see this in his interactions with Bond and Madeline when he attempts to achieve this acceptance by highlighting the similarities between them to show that they are just the same. But more than just acceptance, Safin is attempting to justify himself and to present himself in a more favorable light. When Madeline comments on how damaged he must be to threaten her daughter, he responds by saying that she is just as damaged and would do anything to survive just like him. The interaction between the two of them ends with Safin saying that she understands him the same way he understands her. When he encounters Bond later, he compares talking to him as speaking to his own reflection, highlighting their common ground of their resentment against Blofeld and their love for Madeline. When Bond retorts, he dismisses it as them developing different methods for the same goal. For Safin, this goal would compromise the continuation of his father's work and to avenge the death of his family. This he achieves by targeting all of Spectre and Blofeld himself with M's secret weapon. No one would think that the death of Spectre would be a bad thing, but unfortunately, Safin doesn't stop there and proceeds to turn it into a weapon of mass destruction. Yet in all this, Safin doesn't show any indication that what he is doing is wrong despite his heinous goals. In fact, in his final scene, he labels himself and Bond as heroes in a tragedy of his own making. In Safin's mind, the widespread death that he will cause is justified. Although Bond points out the obvious and tries to appeal to his emotions, that using Heracles on the world would cause others to suffer the same misery that he did, Safin rejects that notion and mentions that people secretly seek death. In his own words, people want oblivion, and a few of us are born to build it for them. He then labels himself as an invisible god dispensing death, which would eventuate in the world having the chance to evolve. At this point, Bond gives up trying to appeal to him and dismisses him as an irredeemable psychopath. When he is subdued at the end, Safin reveals that his affection for Madeline was a selfish one. If he can't have her, then Bond shouldn't as well. Interestingly, Safin achieved what Blofeld couldn't, to deprive Bond of the joys of familial affection and to give him an empty world. It was he who caused the most detriment to Bond's life, and as of this film is the only villain attributed to his death. But despite this, Bond appears to have some shred of sympathy for Safin. We see this in his conversation earlier in his Japanese-style room, where he mentions to Safin that he understands how it feels to have everything taken away before they're even in the fight. Perhaps there is an element of buying time and trying to talk him down, but when he learns that Safin's mother died trying to save him, Bond's anger momentarily vanishes and he appears to have a moment of compassion. When Bond learns of his separation from Madeline, he doesn't react in anger, but just silently unloads his clip into him. It's noteworthy that Bond looks away while he fires his weapon, as if he was distancing himself from the kill. He knows there is no point talking to him and that he has to be stopped, but at the same time, perhaps there is some element of pity for him. A broken man who has descended into madness from the great tragedy of his own life. So what do you think of Safin from No Time to Die, folks? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and take care.